All right. Welcome back to another episode of BGPerform Reacts. Today, we're going to be diving into opinions that I find on Twitter, and I'm going to be just interjecting my thoughts, my professional opinion, and things that I agree, disagree with on social media. If you guys are interested, hit me up about the Coach Connect. Just DM me Coach Connect, and I will get you started on that. The Coach Connect is a platform that I'm building and putting together to create a coaching environment for those who actually want to take coaching serious and want to take that next step in their career. I want people to view what I do as a coach and what hopefully you want to do as a coach as like a real profession in this world. So I want to make sure we're doing that. And the Coach Connect is literally built to influence the highest standard of coaching, just like my personal coaching. If you aren't a coach and you're an athlete or a client or somebody listening to this who wants to work with me, www.bgperform.com/training, or just hit me up on Instagram at bgperform_, and we can get that going. Let's share the screen and let's get started. So first tweet here comes from Joey Burgles. I believe I don't know if he still is. I think he was the coach of FSU or Florida Atlantic, maybe Florida Atlantic University. I could be wrong, but great video here. Train like an athlete, move fast. I don't think all things need to be fast, right? Like some of this stuff isn't always necessary, but I think what's really important is just intent. And I think it's moving as fast as possible in the time that moving fast is required. I think a lot of people will take these types of movements and do this stuff unnecessarily. Not that they're intentionally doing it wrong, but they're just not moving fast enough when they do this sort of movement, right? Like when you do this sort of thing, you need to be explosive. You need to be fast. You need to be twitchy, right? And I think a lot of people just kind of do these movements and just assume they're going to get the benefits from it. But just like any movement, you need intent. You need a desired outcome, and then you need to execute on that desired outcome, right? And if you don't do that, you're not going to get that stimulus. And that's the biggest thing here. So I think a caveat with this is obviously moving fast, right, is the intent, but movement selection along with that is really important, that they can actually execute on that. So I do like this post overall. All right, another post from Gary DiFilippo, current Pistons director of performance, Corey Schlesinger, and the Box. So Corey is a great coach that I've actually taken a lot from, and I've taken a lot of the work he's done in the NBA and in his time in college basketball and translated that over to MMA. He kind of was the first one to coin this term, microdosing fitness, right? And when we talk about microdosing fitness, it's essentially taking what you would see in a normal, say, like 2-day program and just elongating that throughout the week. And with sports like this, like basketball, that are very constant throughout the week, a lot of games throughout the week, a lot of time needed to recover, and a lot of time needed to play the sport and practice, just like MMA. In the MMA world, you're essentially coaching 5 different sports in a week, or you're having to plan for 5 different sports in a week and manage load for those 5 different sports. So you need to fit in strength conditioning because it's very important, but you need to fit it in the right way, right? So he talks a lot about the ideas behind that stuff, how to actually build that process into the week, how you can actually get the most out of it, right? And how you can actually build that into your program design, how you can build that into the week, and how you can do that. This video is just kind of discussing a couple of the things like in-season training, because I think a lot of people for a very long time viewed this as detrimental to your health, right? Or detrimental to your sport. But when you do it in the right way, and you're doing it in a way that's recovery based, or also allowing the person to get what they need strength wise and then also perform, he's probably one of the best that I've seen in regards to discussing that topic, if not the best. And I've definitely been able to take away a lot from that. So he's kind of created, I don't know if he's ever going to come out with this. I was interested in this, but he has like a portable box that he uses for training, which is a really cool concept where it has all the equipment. It kind of opens up into a rack with, you can see that slant board for jumps and a bunch of other equipment. So maybe a little bit impractical in regards to like everyday use, but for this sort of professional setting where you kind of have that stuff set for you, this is a really cool idea that can translate over very well into success in the basketball world. So great guy, check him out. This is another one from Jerry DiFilippo. He says, I think supersets targeting and pairing opposing muscle groups with back-to-back exercises done with no rest in between, and giant sets, 3 to 4 exercises of different muscle groups done in succession, I think he meant to say, almost like a circuit, can be great, especially for athletes, and here's why. He writes, if you want to really drive home hypertrophy, pairing back-to-back or back-to-back, I think you need some errors on this, but back-to-back exercises, hitting the same muscle groups can be a great way to train into fatigue if you really get to, and enhancing the amount of fibers you can target. 2, efficiency, so basically like saving time on that sort of thing. And then number 3, there can be a benefit of pre-fatiguing antagonistic muscle groups before a movement, so the agonist muscle group you are focusing on next takes even more desired stress. So these are great. I think supersets, trisets, giant sets, and compound sets are insanely underrated, right? Like, for the reasons he mentioned here, you can save time, especially if you're new. You're not going to be able to drive that stimulus of strength as effectively or efficiently. So it's really important that we still get work done. Whereas, like, you might do a squat at what's your 50% max for, muscular absolute strength. So with that, we need to pair that with something that allows you to either continue to train that muscle to fatigue or continues to have you do overall movement, right? We want, when we're working out or we're training, we either want intensity, right, or volume. And those are the couple ways that we can kind of really manage to create adaptation in the body. We can either do a really heavy set or we can do a lot of reps. And we can do one really heavy set or we can do a couple lower intensity sets. Like, those are some of the ideas that we look at. And in supersets, this is where we do a movement like, a bicep curl and a tricep extension, right? They're 2 opposing things. You do them one right after the other. And that would be kind of the idea, right? Compound sets are the opposite, but this is going to be like if you're doing, like they have here, bench press into push-ups, right? Compound set's going to be the same muscle group that you're training back to back. Usually what you're going to see there is something that's a little bit more high skill and intense into something that's a little bit lower skill and less intense, because you're going to be pre-fatigued, and that's going to allow you to kind of like just move a little bit more through that range of motion that you're not able to do on, say, like a heavy bench press, but you're still able to kind of get some extra work in because it's a lighter, less skilled movement. Then we have tricep, which is essentially just 3 movements back to back, essentially targeting the same area, right? So what he kind of has here, which might be a good idea, is some sort of cable lat pull down, a row, and then tricep extension. So we have a little bit more, bicep focus, tricep, something like that. Another one might be, and really a tricep, you can do a lot of things. Like, you could do a goblet squat RDL into a plank. You could do bench press row into a plank. Like, it could be more targeted like he has here, or it can be a little bit separated, and we're just kind of choosing movements that cover a lot of bases. And that's especially good if you have someone who, like I said, with MMA, right? With MMA athletes or athletes who don't have a ton of time to train, hitting all those pieces in one still gets you that stimulus, but allows you to kind of hit the pieces that you need to hit without wasting too much time inside the gym. So, and then a giant set, same thing, but just 4 different movements. So you're just kind of separating that out between 4 movements. So all these things are really important, and they're definitely useful. And I think this was actually in response to a tweet that said, unfortunately, yes, I do find people who superset at the gym annoying, and it's a part of the gym. So I guess don't go. I don't know what to tell you, but I think it can be really efficient, especially for beginners. I know it can be annoying when you're supersetting, but you got to do what you got to do. Efficiency over making other people happy, right? This is from Mike Guadango. Strength training should support force production without compromising speed. Force equals mass times acceleration. Velocity equals distance over time, or divided by time. And power equals force times velocity. And I think the concept here, right? Strength training should support force production without compromising speed is really important to understand, because I think a lot of times with strength training, we kind of see it as like an end all be all, and it can cover a lot of bases, right? But we still need to move fast. And obviously in this sort of setting, we wouldn't want to do a strength training exercise followed by like a speed exercise in any capacity. We'd probably want to do the speed first and then the strength second. That would obviously allow us to avoid this, thing that he's talking about. But obviously he's talking about what's going on underneath this with force, velocity, and power. You can obviously see how these things equate over time, right? So he's talking about how power equals force and velocity, and how force equals mass and acceleration, and the velocity equals distance over time. So these two equal power. And, as you kind of go down that path, as you strength train, you want to make sure you're still able to create power, because you still need force and velocity, and you want to make sure you're doing those things, I guess, together inside of your session. Just needs to be organized in the right way. So Keith Ferrara, volleyball off-season workout: total body lift, vertical plyos, power clean doubles, isometric squat, push jerk, and chin-ups. Strength work done at loads under 80% of 1 rep max, building strength for the next 4 weeks before targeting specific zones. So I like this a lot. There are a couple tweaks I would make. First one being the power cleans. I think obviously these girls move really well, so it looks like they have a decent amount of experience in the power clean. But normally, if these are new girls here, that squat, a little bit of tough squat there. But anyways, if you're a new athlete, or you're just learning the power clean, it's really important you understand that, like, it's important to learn before you execute fully on this movement, because it's very skill based, and it can not give you everything you think it does just because it's a little bit difficult, right? There are some better ways that you could introduce triple extension, which I talked about last week or the week before, I believe, whether that be like med ball throws, or even utilizing a trap bar as like a trap bar pull or a trap bar jump, something like that. But if you are good, like her, 100%, she moves really well through the power clean. I think she's actually getting, what's necessary from that. You can kind of see if we pull this back a little bit, like her extension could be a little bit better, but that triple extension right there is what you're trying to chase. And that looks really good on her. Yeah. So I think she's probably fine with it. Obviously, as it gets better, heavier, you got to be careful of that stuff, but that's fine. Isometric squat, again, that's going to be tough after doing a lot of these things, and they might not be able to fully execute on that. I would see that more as something that's like very early in the workout, maybe even before the clean doubles, just because you're jumping, you're being very explosive, and then you're asking to go into an isometric. I would assume they're going to be pretty fatigued after that point, and that's going to be tough to maintain, which might not be a true isometric. Might not be able to. You might not get a true stimulus of the isometric. Like, it's going to be fatigued, pre-fatigued, so it's going to help. Yeah. And then here, the push jerk is, again, it's one of those movements that it's not difficult per se, but it requires a lot of the body, right? So, and you want to start to look at this from a couple different angles. Like, if you're hitting a squat like this, and then you're going into a push press, like, you can see that movement right here mimics the first part and the second part a lot, right? So I don't know if I would put all of these in the same session. I'd probably go with a more like a seated version, or just a strict press here, because you're almost kind of overdoing it with a lot of that movement, and that might be a lot on the body at that point. The chin-ups are fine. Like, that's a really good spot to put them as well. But yeah, I think overall this is good. I think those little tweaks could be made, and it'd probably be a little bit better, but you got to put it out there, and shout out to you for doing that. So that's good. Zach Goodman, powerlifters, conjugate is best for athletes. S&C, conjugate is best for powerlifting. Me, conjugate is best. Yeah, I think conjugate works really well if you know how to use it. I think condensed conjugate works really well, again, if you know how to use it. I think that the concept of conjugate is just to, in its essence, is the stimulus is the most important thing, right? And I think that's what kind of needs to be, because I think conjugate can be confused for complexity, right? Or kind of changing patterns for one reason or another, or just kind of doing things just to do it. And I the biggest thing with conjugate is just understanding that the stimulus is the goal. So no matter what you're doing, whether it's speed, whether it's strength, that's why it's not so, or that's why in a real, like, true conjugate program, you're going to see the movements move or change around a lot, is because they're trying to get the stimulus of strength to happen, right? And they want to try to avoid any sort of, they want to try to avoid any sort of situation where the they're changing movements just to change movements, right? So that's the most important thing, and that's what we want to try to get in that. So conjugate, very very good programming wise, very efficient, and if you're sticking with the stimulus, you're going to get a lot out of it. So I think we got a couple more. So another institution investing millions in their performance center, recovery and weight room, etc. Still not sure this stuff matters. Look at where programs are investing. I think this is huge. I think the more, and I think not only colleges, and I know it's a little bit tougher right now for like high schools, but high schools, like they need to be investing in this stuff. The more you can develop these systems and develop these rooms and develop this stuff, everything is going to be there, right? And I think you're going to see a lot more progression from the athletes. I think you're going to see the sports programs and the teams invest. And obviously, the more important thing is like you can have the tools, but who's running it, right? And I think that's another big piece these schools have to look at is like who's actually running the program. So that's a big piece of the puzzle as well. All right, Jeremy Toohey, high school soccer, full body strength training day, staggered TB deadlift, single leg box jumps, skater squats, single leg RDL, chin ups, kneeling overhead press, and banded dead bugs. I think this looks good for the most part. I think staggered stance, TB, trap bar, deadlift, which is good. Single leg, I'd probably put the jumps before. I don't know if this was in the correct order, but obviously we wouldn't want to do jumps after we're doing I guess unless he was doing some sort of like French contrast here. If that's the case, then you would want to, do it with something like that. I'd probably, some of these are a little bit higher skill movements that I'd probably want to do a little bit before, but these movements overall, really good. The trap bar deadlift, the staggered stance is really good. The box jumps are really good. Single leg box jumps, I don't know if they're totally necessary. They're probably a little bit dangerous at the end of the day in regards to like what you actually get from them. I'd probably rather do some sort of like single leg broad jump. But a jump is a jump for the most part. The skater squats, those are very good. Again, like I think some of this stuff is a little bit more looks better than it actually is, like is doing this with 10 pounds as beneficial as like a reverse lunge where you're stable and can load a little bit more? I don't know. But I would assume with some of this stuff, depending on where it is, if this is in season, off season, because he doesn't say anything about that. These are all still great movements that you can get a lot out of. And Missy Mitchell Macbeth tweets, no, it's not the 25 to 30 minute weight room sessions a week where athletes encounter force in a controlled environment, hurting your volleyball player's back. It's the 10 plus hours a week of practice with bad mechanics on bad surfaces, random running, no days off mentality, lack of nutrition and sleep to facilitate recovery. But go on and get that 2 weeks, no weight room, full go on the court, no, as injury carousel takes another turn. I think I'm getting this one right, but I do see this a lot. I think what tends to happen in the sporting world is these coaches get very sensitive and they get very protective, whether they should or not, of the athletes. And I think they see injury and they think it must be the weight room, because a lot of the time the weight room has kind of had a negative connotation with this stuff. And it's kind of shown that not shown that you can get hurt, but like when you're in the wrong environment, you can get hurt. Right. And I think a lot of coaches just get nervous. It's just like a lot of coaches who get nervous when you lift heavy, when you need to get strong, And I think a lot of coaches equate heavy lifting with bulkiness or lack of movement and whatnot. And it's just not the case. So I think, if I'm taking this right, a lot of these coaches will, assume that the 2 weight sessions are the problem and they'll try to remove those, as opposed to the crazy practice conditions, the length of the practice conditions, no progression, this no days off mentality, not really sleeping or eating correctly. And then they'll avoid the weight room, and then they'll, for whatever reason, go on as say that that's the reason they're not, getting injured. I would assume in certain circumstances or certain places, this might be the case. If you have someone who's not really knowledgeable or running the weight room the right way, this might actually, and contextually be correct. But in the case that you have someone who knows what they're doing, is knowledgeable and understands, there's just no way that that's the case, because I wouldn't see something like that happening. So, but that's it. That's it for this week. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any questions or any content you want me to look at and react to, just send it over my way. I appreciate it as always. And like I said in the beginning, if you want to work with me, it's www bgperform.com/training. And if you want to join the Coach Connect, just DM me Coach Connect, and I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.